everybody into the main call. I will remove. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Gottfriedson Indian Residential Schools Day Scholar Class Action Announcement Conference Call. Bonjour, mesdames et messieurs. Bienvenue à l'appel conférence annonce du recours collectif des pensionnats indiens Gottfriedson. I would now like to turn the meeting over. J'aimerais maintenant céder la parole à Annie Dergalstanian. Please go ahead, à vous la parole.
Merci. Welcome everyone to today's conference. I would just like to take a moment to remind everyone here that if you feel triggered by today's event and you need immediate assistance, support is available through the Hope for Wellness helpline at 1-855-242-3310 or through the online chat at hopeforwellness.ca, which is open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Also, for immediate assistance to those who may need it, the National Residential School Crisis Line is available 24 hours a day at 1-866-925-4419. Si vous avez besoin d'une aide immédiate concernant les événements d'aujourd'hui, vous pouvez obtenir du soutien en appelant la ligne d'écoute d'espoir pour le mieux-être au 1-855-242-3310 ou en ligne à espoirpourlemieux-être.ca. Il est aussi possible de contacter la ligne d'écoute téléphonique pour les pensionnats au 1-866-992-5449. I will now turn it over to Minister Bennett to deliver her remarks.
Kwai, Ulakut, Tansi, hello, bonjour. Je me joins à vous aujourd'hui des territoires traditionnels des Mississaugas de the Credit, où nous honorons tous les peuples autochtones qui ont pagayé ces eaux et dont les mocassins ont parcouru ces terres. I'm here to share in a momentous occasion an important achievement in our shared journey towards reconciliation with Indigenous peoples across this country, a journey that makes clear the Government of Canada's determination to address past colonial policies and continue righting past wrongs. We have just come from an important and moving meeting with the survivors and descendants of the Day Scholars class action. We thank Jeanette Jules for the beautiful prayer and hoping her hope that today would lift some of the hurt and pain, and remembering the survivors that have gone to the spirit world. Violet Gottfriedson, Doreen, Fred Johnson. Fred Johnson had said just before he died, "You stole our language, you stole our culture, you stole our spirit. This feeling never goes away." While many Canadians are aware of the Indian Residential School Settlement Agreement, few are aware that not all survivors of residential schools could receive compensation under that agreement. The day scholars, those who attended a residential school during the day but returned home at night, could seek compensation for physical and sexual abuse suffered on the school premises. But unlike residents, they were not eligible to receive compensation for the experience of attending the schools. All of these children left school at the end of the day. All too many suffered unspeakable harms and trauma. They were not given a safe place to learn and grow. Instead, they were stripped of their culture, language, and traditional knowledge. Today, I'm honored to be here with survivor class members Darlene Bulpett, Daphne Paul, Charlotte Gilbert, and Deanna Jules, and descendant class members Rita Polson, Amanda Big Sorrel Horse. I would also like to acknowledge the passing of Representative Plaintiffs Violet Gottfriedson and Fred Johnson, who were both staunch advocates for the former Indian Day School students and tireless leaders in paving the way for this settlement. I profoundly regret that they did not live to see this momentous day, and I hope that they would be proud of this settlement and the important work that continues today. Throughout the negotiations, the parties shared one key principle. Any settlement must ensure that no survivor is left behind. While today's announcement has come too late for many survivors, the settlement will ensure that their estates and their descendants will be able to access compensation on their behalf. Today is a testament to the persistence, dedication, and resilience of all survivors, their descendants, and their communities. The signing of this agreement marks an important milestone for thousands of day scholars who suffered harm while attending our Indian residential school. Au cours des derniers mois, le gouvernement du Canada et l'avocat des plaignants ont recommencé à négocier pour résoudre cette affaire d'une manière juste, compatissante et respectueuse. To ensure that compensation to survivors is not delayed further, the parties have agreed to separate the band class claims. This allowed us to focus on resolving the survivor and descendant classes. The proposed settlement balances the individual compensation and forward-looking investments. The settlement will provide individual compensation of $10,000 for each eligible survivor class member for the harm suffered while attending an Indian residential school. However, we know that in many cases, the harm extends far beyond what can be fixed by any dollar amount. We know that the impacts of residential schools have left scars, not only on survivors, but also their descendants. That is why the proposed settlement also includes $50 million investment to create an Indigenous-led, not-for-profit foundation. The Day Scholar Revitalization Society will provide funding to survivors and descendants to support healing, wellness, education, language, culture, heritage, and commemoration. The word proposed had been used to describe this agreement, but we need to be clear. The agreement is signed and awaiting court approval. From now until August 2021, class members will be able to review the proposed settlement and provide their comments to the court. I am pleased to note that they will be able to provide their comments on paper rather than in person, so that the experience for them has the potential to be less traumatizing. In September, the parties will seek federal court approval of the proposed settlement, and the court will consider the comments made by class members and the submissions of their legal counsel. It will then decide whether the settlement is fair, reasonable, and in the best interests of the class members. Once approved by the federal court, compensation and other benefits will be available to eligible class members, and it is my sincere hope that this will unlock a healing process for all those involved. Survivors and their descendants have told us that an important part of healing and moving forward includes a meaningful official apology on behalf of the Government of Canada. We have heard survivors, and while this is not part of the settlement agreement, we will be listening to their concerns as we work together on this request. Les ententes de règlement comme celle-ci sont un important rappel de pouvoir, de dialogue et de partenariat pour résoudre les griefs historiques qui ont encore un impact aujourd'hui. Ensemble, le gouvernement du Canada a travaillé avec les survivants pour trouver une résolution hors cours, significative et qui perdurera. I would like to offer the sincere appreciation and gratitude to our team of federal negotiators, Tom Isaac, the Ministerial Special Representative, Travis Henderson, Lauren Lachance, Ansley Harvey, Charmaine de Lauray, and Krista Robertson. To live up to the government's commitment to reconciliation, we strive to resolve Indigenous claims, especially those involving children, outside of the courts, wherever possible. Where there's still work to do, I pledge to you that the Government of Canada will continue to work with survivors and their families, their council, Indigenous leadership, and the provinces and territories to resolve remaining childhood claims. Together, we will move forward on the path to reconciliation as we support the healing and commemoration of those affected by harmful policies of the past. The survivors and descendants have been clear. They want to ensure that their children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren never have to go through what they have suffered. They look forward to them being able to grow up proud of who they are, speaking their languages, practicing their cultures. We continue to our work in true partnership. We are so grateful for their vision, leadership, and determination that got us to this day and will take us into the future. As Violet's sister Joanne said this morning, this is a beautiful start of healing and wellness. Miigwech, Kuyanamik, Marci, thank you, merci.
Thank you, Minister. I will now invite Charlotte Gilbert to deliver her remarks.
Great. Thank you for your remarks, your comments, and a summary of the meeting that we had prior to this, Minister Bennett. And I like to say thank you for all that's here, like Dina, Amanda, and the other descendant, survivor, and survivor. This has been a real long process. Been 14 years. It's not been easy. Every time we went to court, it seems like living, regurgitating the same trauma that I endured as a child. We were children. We did not deserve the treatment that I received from the priests, brothers, and the sisters, and the teachers. And this included some of our own students in the school system because they were jealous of us being able to go home and have long hair and wear the clothes we want. And it shouldn't have happened. We are all so happened. There's a lot of the students that were from up north, the Yukon. I remember Mimi and Roger Needley. I remember them clearly. They did not like the weather around here because it was too hot. But you know that my family is 3 generations of residential school survivors. That's my grandparents, my parents, and myself. That's 3 generations. However, that, it's probably, you're looking at 60, 70 years. Some of us, I know my grandmother and she was strict. And somehow, sometimes I thought she didn't like me, but I seem to have endured all the switches and the pain she put me through to do all the work I needed to get done. As for going to we were located just across the highway from the residential school. We were the only house on that side. There was no trailer court, no other houses, no paved highway. It was a dirt road only, no bridge. And it was really convenient. You don't, this was prime location for the priests and the brothers, taking the boys for walks on weekends or after school, and the priests and the brothers. did their dirty deeds. I don't have to go into detail. Besides enduring all what we went through attending the school. As for my children, you know, I look at my grandchildren. They say pretty well whatever is on their mind freely. And I'm really happy that they are able to do that. I wasn't able to do that. I was to be seen and not heard. And it took me a long time to understand my parents of why they were the way they were. Alcoholism was big time. They tried to drown their feelings. And then, you know, with the alcoholism, there was neglect. They neglected us, children. I have pictures of me and my sister, Juanita. Not looking too good. We've been neglected. You know, we needed showers. We needed change of clothes. And it took me a lot of years, up to maybe when I was 34. And that's half of my lifetime to forgive my parents, to understand why they were the way they were. And it was a residential school. You know, they had no choice. They had to let us go to the Carolyn-Indian residential school. There was so many schools just across the river there, but we had no choice. And I'm just glad we're here now after 14 years of fighting the federal government in this day scholar class action, that we are here. There's still work yet to be done. It's got to go to the court system, you know, to get approved by the federal court before they can take effect to the next step in this process is a settlement approval hearing, which will start on September 27th. And I'm hoping, you know, this gets out to all our day scholars right across Canada, that they fill out the necessary paperwork to whatever they're entitled to, their rights. You know, we are being acknowledged, we are being heard, that we suffered the same as what the other survivors have from the regular residential school settlement. And I really give thanks to the legal team and all the support that we got throughout this whole 14 years, you know. And I thought, you know, we had a choice whether to go again to court. And oh God, I was going to go look for my box of papers, you know, and I got a big box. And well, I was thinking, go through the feelings again, you know, regurgitate, try and be tough and strong. Those federal lawyers, boy, they really try and rip you right apart. And I had to be strong and stand up to them. And we did a good job. We did an excellent job. And I was in favor of this because, you know, we've lost several survivors throughout the years. Vi being one, Doreen being another, Kathy being another, Richard, my cousins, you know, there's a lot of them. They're fragile, they have underlying health issues. I'm glad we're going to be able to give recognition that we're being heard to the ones that are here now with us to enjoy our, so they're glad to hear, you know, they're being heard. Our stories are being heard. And I give thanks. Cook's Jam.
Thank you, Charlotte. I now invite Ina Jules to deliver remarks.
Fight Waitap, Dina Jules and Squawks, to Kamloops to Shawatmuk. My traditional names are Sundance Pipe Woman, Yellow Flower Woman, and Black Wolf Woman. I'm a member of the Kamloops to Shawatmuk and am a representative of the day scholars who attended residential schools. When I first went to the Kamloops residential school at 7 years of age, I was the third generation of my family. I endured 5 years as a day scholar and 1 year as a resident. These years were the dark ages of my life. Before I went to the residential school, my paternal grandparents, who had not attended residential school, helped our family stay strong in our cultural and linguistic heritage and taught me Shawatmuk as a child. My family and community members taught me our Shawatmuk history and stories and Shawatmuk cultural practices. I learned how to gather traditional foods, how to hunt and fish, how to create traditional Shawatmuk medicines, and how to sing our traditional Shawatmuk songs, which we sang often. The residential school took all of that teaching and knowledge away from me. The other children and I were physically and verbally abused for speaking our native languages. The staff told me that speaking Shawatmuk was a heathen activity. They called me a pagan and dumb Indian and told me that I needed to become more white. They called Shawatmuk spirituality devil worshipping. From my treatment at the Kamloops Indian Residential School, I became ashamed to be Shawatmuk and to speak Shawatmuk. I was taught to feel that I did not belong with the Shawatmuk people. And practicing my culture and traditions, I became disconnected from my family and community. I lost language, my cultural pride, and my own identity. As an adult, I have worked hard to recover my sense of self-worth, my connection to my community. I became an educator for the Kamloops to Shawatmuk. And now I am an elder providing guidance and mentorship to young Indigenous people. I have been studying to regain my language, although I will never be as fluent as I was as a child before attending residential school. I feel this loss every day because speaking Shawatmuk defines who we are as Shawatmuk people. Our language connects us to our land, our history, and our community. Over a decade ago, I joined with Charlotte Gilbert, Darlene Bulpett, Daphne Paul, as well as Violet Gottfriedson, who has sadly now left us, to be a representative plaintiff in this court case to seek justice for day scholars. It was not acceptable to me that we were left out of the Indian Residential School settlement in 2007. I wanted to fight to hold Canada accountable for what we day scholars endured at the residential schools. Now, at long last, we have signed agreement which binds Canada to recognize the experiences of day scholars and to provide some compensation for healing and commemoration. I am proud that we stood up for ourselves and for our people, and that now, after many years, our experiences are being recognized and compensated. Although I am relieved that the settlement has been achieved, at the end of the day, no amount of compensation can change the legacy of residential schools. Nothing can restore us to being whole. However, we are dealing with ongoing loss of many survivors. We must grieve for the survivors we have lost during the legal fight, and for those who did not survive the residential schools we love, honor, and respect them. Our focus must be on restoring our communities, our children, and their children. I often say to my grandchildren that it is everyone's responsibility to be the change that we wish to make in the world. And I firmly believe that. I hope that we will take this settlement and that this time as an opportunity to reflect on how far we have come and how far we have left to go along the journey toward justice and closure for the day scholars, residential school survivors, and Indigenous people, so that the future looks much different than in the past. Oh, Gottfriedson, thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, Dina. I now invite our final speaker, Rita Polson, to deliver remarks.
Eight quail to Okmasiaya, Stunux chin squish, ala si shaf a saikas chin, a misukseala but the quail to Onomschalap to Okmasiaya. Good day, everybody. My ancestral name is Stunux. My ancestry is Sishaf Nation and also the Saikas Nation, carrier people. It's good to see you all here today. I want to thank everyone who has been on this long journey with us over the last 14 years and put in their heart and soul into this work. And I'm so happy that this day has finally come. I'm a representative plaintiff for the descendant class. The descendant class are the children of the day scholars. I agreed to be a representative plaintiff over 10 years ago. I wanted to have Canada recognize the harm we suffered as children of day scholars as a result of our parents being forced to attend residential school during the day. Canada not only denied that we, the children of day scholars, suffered because of our parents' experiences as day scholars, but even denied that our parents suffered loss of language and culture because of the punishments inflicted upon them in Canada's residential schools. I agreed to stand up for all children of day scholars, along with Amanda Big Sorrel Horse from Tecumloops, to seek Canada's acknowledgement for the loss of our language and culture suffered not only by the day scholars, but also their children. My story is similar to many children of day scholars. Because of what my father experienced at residential school, I did not have the benefit of learning our language, Shisha Shishatlam. No one spoke Shisha Shishatlam in my home because of my father's experience at residential school, his loss of language and culture. I was not raised in our traditional ways, and I did not experience our culture growing up. However, I've devoted my life, my adult life, to learning, reclaiming, and teaching Shisha Shishatlam. I'm now a language teacher. It hasn't been an easy road, as I see every day the devastation that the residential school has caused our people and our kids. Like I said, today has been a long time coming. Amanda and I have been standing up here for over 10 years fighting alongside our other survivors. Many of my father's generation have died during this time. I'm heartened by the announcement of the settlement agreement. I'm heartened that at long last, the harms and losses suffered by day scholars and their children are finally being recognized. I hope today will be a beginning time of justice and closure for our day scholars and their families. A $50 million Day Scholars Revitalization Fund will be set up as part of this settlement. I'm happy to hear. These funds will be used to benefit day scholars and their children by supporting our healing, our wellness, our education, our language, our culture, our heritage, and commemoration. Commemoration will be important for the descendants of day scholars to ensure that no Canadian forgets the horrible legacy of the residential schools. The legacy which I and other children of day scholars had to live through our whole entire life and still are living through it. I know that no one lawsuit can change what happened to my father and to us as his children. It cannot replace what we have lost, but my hope is that this settlement announcement today can help us put us all on a good path towards healing. Like so many of our communities need this healing time to move forward, to revitalize our beautiful languages and our cultures. I want my kids to carry on learning our language, speaking our Shishashlam, being proud of who they are as Kalmuk people. That is so, so important now in this time and this journey we've been going through. Healing is important, and with that, language and culture brings around healing and health and wellness.
Thank you very much, Rita. We'll now start the question period. As usual, one question and one follow-up. Nous allons maintenant commencer la période de questions. Comme d'habitude, une question et une question de suivi. I ask that if you have questions for the survivors and their descendants, that you please direct your questions to them as a group. Je vous demande si vous avez des questions à poser aux survivants et à leurs descendants de vous adresser à eux en tant que groupe. Operator, do we have the first question on the phone?
Yes, thank you. Please press star one at this time. N'hésitez pas à appuyer sur étoile 1 pour toute question. First question, la première question est de David Aiken, the Global News. À vous la parole. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. And just first to the three survivors and plaintiffs in this matter, thank you very much for telling us about your story. It's important to hear. I just have a couple of questions for Minister Bennett. Mr. Bennett, I know you will encourage your officials to, as quickly as possible, circulate some information about this agreement and some information about the three women who just spoke to us. We don't have that information right now, so I know you want to encourage people to do that as quickly as possible. Second, thank you for explaining what this agreement is about, but I think I asked you last week, I would like to get an update now on the band class settlement, which this particular lawsuit started with. I know there are lots of First Nations in the country, 105, who are hoping that this settlement will now clear the way for some additional settlements for the band class. Could you bring us up to date on that?
Thank you, David. And I mean, today is for the survivors and the descendants. I think you heard very clearly that this was very important, that we are able to settle these classes of the survivors and the descendants as we go forward. And as you've heard, many of those plaintiffs and survivors have already gone to the spirit world. So it's very important that we focus on this. And it was very important also that, as Rita has said, setting up the Day Scholars Revitalization Fund that will allow access to the healing, wellness, language, culture, education, commemoration to go forward. A band class is a novel class. It would be very it is new work for our government to do, and therefore it was very important for us to be able to settle the survivor and descendant class and to be able to get that done now.
And just, I guess, a follow-up then, speaking about this particular settlement, it has been 14 years. And so I'd invite Minister Bennett, and I'd invite any of the survivors who are with us today, if they'd care to comment. What was the breakthrough? What occurred, obviously very recently, that allowed for the parties to come to some agreement outside of court? Again, given that it's been 14 years, did somebody have some change of views, change of leadership? Could you give us some indication of how we finally got here?
Well, it might be more appropriate, David, that the representatives speak to that. I think nobody wanted to go back to court, and we are, I think, very grateful that the negotiators were able to come to this as a just and fair settlement that the parties have agreed to. And I think, David, one of the other things that is really important, as Charlotte said, to get the word out now to all the day scholars, survivors, and descendants, to make sure that as we move forward, they are able to comment, and that we are able to resolve this in September, such that we can begin that work of unlocking the healing and being able to set up the revitalization fund. So, but it is really important, as you've seen with the day school settlement and with 60 Scoop, it's really important that everybody knows what has been agreed to, so that they can be part of the fair and just settlement.
Thank you, merci. The next question, la prochaine question est de Olivia Stefanovic, CBC News. À vous la parole. Please go ahead.
Hi there. I just wanted to say to the survivors, thank you so much for your time, for sharing your stories and your insights. And thank you to Minister Bennett also for making yourself available for questions. Minister Bennett, these questions are for you. From what I understand, as you mentioned in your opening remarks, many of these survivors, these day scholars, are no longer with us. And many of them have called for an apology from the federal government about the harm they suffered at residential schools. And we know your government is big on apologies. So why hasn't your government issued a formal apology to day scholars yet? And will you commit to doing this today?
So the work that we need to do together on the request for an apology is very important work, as you've seen, and in the, whether it's the various apologies, starting with Anderson, with the Prime Minister in Labrador. The people receiving the apology need to be able to hear what they need to hear in order for it to be a meaningful apology that unlocks the healing. This is the kind of work that we do together to be able to make sure that there's an admission that harm was done, and that we are sorry, and that this is what we're doing to make sure it never happens again. But it is being so important and meaningful to be able to know that the survivors and the descendants are hearing what they need to hear, and that work is truly important as we go forward, and as that determination of apology is taken.
Your government is involved in other litigation involving residential school survivors, such as St. Anne's. The survivors of St. Anne's have requested to meet with you personally, Minister Bennett, to discuss a settlement in that case. Will you meet with them, and if not, why?
Olivia, I've met with them before, and I certainly would meet with them again. As you know, there is a independent assessment ongoing to make sure that they have received the appropriate compensation. Justice Pitfield is doing that work, but the kind of approaches to the healing that has been requested from the survivors of St. Anne's, I am more than happy to meet with them.
Thank you, merci. The next question, la prochaine question de Christy Kirkup, de Global Mail. Please go ahead, à vous la parole.
Hello, good afternoon. I'd just like to ask, why did it take a class action lawsuit to get to the settlement today?
Christy, thanks for the question. And I think that the class actions has been the way that these proceed, because then you have the representative claimants and a body to negotiate with on behalf of all the other claimants. I have to tell you, we have tried in the past to be able to just avoid that step. It is very, very difficult, because you actually do have to have a body that will negotiate and determine what is fair and reasonable. And so that's why we are so grateful to the representative plaintiffs today and the hard work they've done on behalf of all the other survivors and descendants.
And just as a follow-up, if I may, you mentioned the, I guess, prospect of going back to court. I apologize for asking this, but I'm just wondering if you could please just bring us up to speed. Why was there a prospect of this going back to court? And obviously that didn't happen, but why was there the suggestion this could go back to court and ultimately the settlement was reached?
Well, I think that maybe Charlotte would like to answer that. I think that plaintiffs always have the right to go back to court if negotiations aren't going well. And I think you heard from Charlotte that they wanted to be at the table to make this work without that being necessary.
I was approached probably about a month ago. I was asked that we were given like two options to go to court. We've been through that already, and it's just like I was saying earlier about going and dragging my big box of information out and going through the re-traumatization of, going to the residential school. I really did not like that feeling. And when one of the counselors called and said that, and she said, or either we could just go and maybe accept the offer that was given by the federal government to accept whatever they're going to be offering now. And if we went through the other, another court, there's always a possibility a decision being made, we lost. There's always that possibility. And I didn't want to take that chance. I didn't personally myself. So I opted for what the federal government offered, and that's what we're doing now. Cookshaw.
Thank you, merci. Please press star one at this time if you have a question. N'hésitez pas à appuyer sur étoile 1 pour toute question. The next question is from Teresa Wright, the Canadian Press. À vous la parole. Please go ahead.
Hello. Thank you again for taking our questions, and thank you to the survivors for sharing your very difficult stories. It's important to hear them, I think. Minister Bennett, I wonder if you could, we don't have a lot of details right now, but perhaps just let us know, first of all, how many people are going to be eligible for this this settlement. And also I would like if you could explain to me the amount, the $10,000 per survivor. And, you talk about this being fair and reasonable compensation. I'm wondering if you think that is fair and reasonable compensation, given the fact that these survivors have been waiting for decades and decades to receive some form of compensation.
Thank you, Teresa, for the question. And once this is, as Charlotte said, once the today the agreement is released and made available, then it will determine how many people come forward who were day scholars, people who went to residential schools but went home at night. As you know, in the Indian residential schools settlement, those that had been abused or had been part of the earlier settlement, but this is what is known as the common experience payment, which, as you've heard from the survivors and descendants, the harm that was done by being ashamed of speaking your language, being ashamed of your language and culture, that this is what this settlement is about. That harmed everyone who went there, and that to these schools, and we want to leave no one behind. So it is always it is about the plaintiffs deciding what's fair. And I think that, again, that settlement is one aspect to it, but as you've heard, that a separate fund dedicated to day scholars for the revitalization is going to be very important, as you've heard, in terms of language and culture and healing commemoration. So it is I understand that was very important to the survivors and the descendants. And as it was, I remember during the 60s scoop, I remember when Chief Marsha Brown came out from the courthouse, even though they'd won, and wanted to talk about language, culture, healing, and all of the things that had been taken away. So this is a very important part of this settlement in terms of being able to unlock the healing.
Yeah, thank you. And for my follow-up, you know, the NDP is planning to table a unanimous consent motion tomorrow in the House of Commons, and is calling on the federal government to recognize what happened at residential schools as genocide. Will you be supporting that motion?
Well, I think that we are, as you know, the TRC had determined this was cultural genocide. I think that we will look at the wording of the motion. The Prime Minister did last week acknowledge many of the policies of the government from the National Inquiry on Missing and Murdered Indigenous Peoples, Indigenous women and girls, amounted to genocide. So we will look carefully at the motion.
Thank you, merci. Il n'y a plus de questions pour le moment. There are no further questions at this time. I'll return the meeting back over to Ms. Annie Bergel-Stanion.
Thank you, operator. So seeing as there are no more questions, this concludes the press conference. Just a note for all the reporters on the line, the news release is now live online, so you can find some helpful information there. And yeah, ceci met fin à la conférence de presse. Merci. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. The conference has now ended. Please disconnect.